and with a 17-foot diameter. Now, to put that size into perspective, an average fire truck is about 40 feet long and 12 feet wide, so it would just fill the fairing. As for payload mass, Falcon 9 is capable of carrying about 50,000 pounds to low Earth orbit. Now, a fire truck is a good analogy for this as well, because it can weigh about just that when it's filled with water and people. Today, our COSMO-SkyMed payload is about 5,000 pounds, or 10% of Falcon 9's total capacity. The fairing halves we are using today are flight proven, and we'll be attempting to recover them once again when they make their way back to Earth. Now, we're just under the T-minus 12-minute mark until liftoff. The Falcon 9 team began their final checks at T-minus 2 hours. And most recently, we completed the ground team pull to proceed with propellant load and launch at T-minus 38 minutes. And we begin prop loading at T-minus 35 minutes, and Falcon 9 is a bipropellant vehicle, and that means that we use two propellants, and that's a fuel and an oxidizer. So for Falcon 9, we use a refined form of kerosene, or RP1, or rocket propellant 1 for our fuel. And then to burn the fuel, we need an oxidizer. Falcon 9's oxidizer is super chilled liquid oxygen, or what we call densified LOX. And that is chilled well below its boiling point, which increases its density, and that allows us to load more into the first and second stage LOX tanks. Now, currently, fuel loading is complete on the second stage, while loading continues on the first stage until about T-minus 6 minutes. Liquid oxygen is loading on both first and second stages as we speak. Now, when it's fully fueled, Falcon 9's first and second stage combine to carry over 1.1 million pounds of propellant. And we'll burn through most of that over the 8.5 minutes that it takes to land the first stage and get the second stage into its initial orbit. Now, we also need an igniter to start burning the fuel and oxidizer, and for that we use the chemical TTEB, or triethyl aluminum and triethyl borane. It produces a characteristic green flash that we can sometimes see at the base of the rocket, so you can look out for that at T-minus 2 seconds right before liftoff. Now, once our Merlin engines ignite, they'll begin throwing the combustion exhaust out of the engine nozzles at the base of the rocket, resulting in a push on the vehicle in the opposite direction. Now, this is a great example of Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now, again, as for weather, we are keeping an eye on this. We are still currently red on the range and no go for launch at this moment. But we are hopeful that weather conditions will improve over the next few minutes for a liftoff at 6:11 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our mission today is for COSMO-SkyMed Second Generation FM2 for our customer Thales Alenia Space. The constellation is owned by the Italian Space Agency and Ministry of Defense. The dual-purpose network is composed of 4 identical satellites of the first generation, launched in orbit between 2007 and 2010, which will gradually be replaced by the second generation ones, and improving efficiency and capability in key areas such as nation security and planetary preservation. The first satellite of the second generation was launched in 2019, and today will be the second generation satellite to launch. To help us better understand the capabilities of the COSMO-SkyMed constellation, here's an explanation from the Italian Space Agency's President and Head of Programs Directorate.
The COSMO-SkyMed Second Generation is a constellation of 4 satellites equipped with a synthetic aperture payload able to acquire images in any part of the Earth's surface with an unprecedented resolution and image quality. The COSMO-SkyMed satellites, like the optical systems, are able to operate during the night and in presence of clouds. This is thanks to the specific frequency used for the acquisition. The antenna is totally new and is able to acquire simultaneously images at a very big distance between them, and the data acquired contain a lot of new information with respect to the past generation. For the better use of the satellites and the exploitation of data, we have developed a new control center and processing center in Italy. This will enable the development of new science and new services application for the benefit of citizens, institutions, and entrepreneurs.
COSMO-SkyMed constellation is not only a very important technical instruments in the field of Earth observation, but is also an important support to the strategy of Italy to international collaboration. Thanks to COSMO-SkyMed over the years, and even more will be in the future with the enlargement of the constellation, we can establish collaboration with other countries to share use of data provided by the constellation and to enlarge the coverage of the planet with other instruments offered by partners. I'm talking about so far, for example, Argentina. We plan in the future to do collaboration with Israel and so on. Also very important is the fact that we use COSMO-SkyMed as third-party contributor to the Copernicus program of the European Space Agency and the European Union. In this way, we offer important strategic and precious data to collect with our constellation, also to other partners, to other producers of data for the benefit of Europe and the rest of the world.
You may have noticed that the clock has stopped. That is because we've had a hold on the countdown due to poor weather conditions. Leading up to launch, there was a strong cold front approaching Florida and some thick layered cloudiness in the area. Now, when we started the webcast, we were red on the range in violation of the thick cloud rule. We were hopeful that weather conditions were going to improve for liftoff, but unfortunately, we are standing down from today's attempt. The vehicle and the payload remain in good health, and our next launch opportunity is tomorrow at 6:11 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESPS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, June 30th, and we're here at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 3:31 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Andy Tran. I'm a production supervisor here at SpaceX. Welcome to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter 2 mission. It's our second dedicated smallsat rideshare program launch and 20th launch of 2021. For those of you who joined us yesterday, you know that we got all the way down to T-minus 11 seconds, but had to stand down from our launch attempt due to rotary aircraft entering the keep-out zone. We are expecting the airways to stay clear today and looking forward to having Falcon 9 deliver the 85 spacecraft and 3 Starlink satellites on board to orbit. Now this includes CubeSats, microsats, and orbital transfer vehicles, sometimes called space tugs, which will deploy their spacecraft after separating from Falcon 9. Today's launch is SpaceX's second polar orbit launch from the East Coast, and only the second polar trajectory since the late 1960s flown out of Cape Canaveral. A polar orbit is one in which satellites pass above the North and South poles as opposed to the equator. SpaceX has worked closely with the Air Force and the FAA to create a trajectory that meets the necessary safety requirements for flight. So far, everything's looking like a great day for a rocket launch at the Cape, and with liftoff in just under 10 minutes, let's take a closer look at Falcon 9. The 2-stage vehicle is standing about 229 feet tall, or slightly taller than a 21-story building. It's named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, and the number 9 indicates the number of Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. Today's mission is the 8th flight for this particular booster. That bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is the first stage. Its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space and then separate from the rest of the rocket. From there, it will make its way back to Earth and target a landing on land this afternoon on Landing Zone 1, which is the pad that you see on screen right now. And if you're an Eastern Florida resident, you might even be able to see Falcon 9 over the ocean or also hear one or more of the sonic booms as Falcon 9 makes its way back to land. On top of the first stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage. It connects the 2 stages and houses the pneumatic pushers that allow the first and second stage to separate during flight. And then on top of the inner stage is the Falcon 9 second stage, which takes the payload to its eventual destination in orbit. After the first stage separates about 2.5 minutes into flight, the second stage will then carry the 88 spacecraft to orbit. Similar to the first transporter mission, we'll be flying a fuel dome payload tray, which is essentially a small platform mounted on the back end of the second stage fuel dome that will release a handful of spacecraft today. This is worth mentioning as we expect this tray to obstruct one of our 2 MVAC views during flight. At the top of the rocket, you'll notice a large nose cone. This is called the fairing. Encapsulated inside the fairing are all 88 satellites, protecting them until the vehicle is outside of the Earth's atmosphere, at which point the fairing separates to expose the satellites to space. For today's mission, our fairing is making its 3rd flight, and we're also going to be attempting to recover the fairing halves from the water following landing with our chartered recovery vessel, HOS Briarwood. The chief engineer held a technical poll at T-minus 60 minutes, and the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at T-minus 38 minutes. Since the T-minus 35-minute mark, Falcon 9 has been loading propellants. The vehicle is a bipropellant vehicle, which means it uses 2 types of propellants. For fuel, a refined form of kerosene called RP1, and for oxidizer, super chill liquid oxygen, we also refer to that as LOX. Currently, RP1 is fully loaded on the second stage and almost fully loaded on the first stage. Liquid oxygen loading is currently underway. We're also loading helium into storage vessels on the first and second stages. We take cold helium and run it through heat exchangers on the Merlin engines, and this hot helium is used to fill the empty volume in the tanks created by the engine pumps pulling propellant out of the stage. A few seconds ago, engine chill began. This is where we opened the pre-valves between the first stage prop tanks and the 9 Merlin engines. This allows a little bit of cold liquid oxygen to flow into the turbopumps, bringing them down to a temperature close to that of the super chill propellant that will soon be flowing through the engines at liftoff. We're at T-minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. The vehicle is healthy. We're tracking no issues so far. The range is standing by to support, and the weather is green for today's liftoff. All systems continue to be go for an on-time liftoff at 3:31 p.m. Eastern Time.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
Today's launch will mark SpaceX's 20th mission of the year and the 127th mission to date. Of the 9 missions flown so far this year, 18 were on reuse booster and will be the 8th flight for this booster flying on today's mission. Now, if you look at all of the Falcon 9 missions SpaceX has flown to date, half have been flown on flight-proven boosters. Reusability allows SpaceX to fly the most expensive parts of the rocket, which in turn drives down the cost of space access. It also allows us to increase our launch cadence and provide more flight opportunities for our customers like those on board today's mission. In fact, last year, we launched more than any other launch provider in the world. If you've been keeping track, you know our first transporter mission launched a record-breaking 143 spacecraft. And while there are fewer customer spacecrafts on board today's compared to Transporter 1, we're actually launching more mass to orbit on this mission than the previous one. SpaceX is targeting 3 dedicated rideshare flights to sun-synchronous orbits per year, and we also offer opportunities for a ride to orbit on our Starlink missions, which launch every couple of weeks. Small satellites can ride to space on SpaceX's Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, as well as Starship in the not-too-distant future. We are under 5 minutes from liftoff. Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. In a few moments here, the strongback will begin to open up its clamp arms, and once open, it will begin to retract away from the rocket to its pre-launch position, about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. And as Falcon 9 lifts off, hydraulic arms will continue to pull the strongback further away to provide clearance for liftoff. So there was the call out for the clamp arms to start opening up. They are situated right at the bottom of the fairing there. The strongback is part of the transporter erector, also called the TE. The TE's job is to roll Falcon 9 out to the launch pad, raise it to a vertical launch position, also route power, fluids, and communication to both the rocket and satellite. The TE has a launch mount that the first stage is clamped to, and the strongback that is hinged to that launch mount. And you can start to hear the hiss and pop of pressure venting from the rocket and the plumbing in the transporter erector. At this stage, the strongback should be reclined to its pre-launch position, again 2 degrees away from the vehicle. We are just over 3 minutes until liftoff. The vehicle remains in good health. The first and second stages are almost fully fueled. Gaseous oxygen is also venting from the base of Falcon 9. That is the chillin of the Merlin turbopumps. About a minute before liftoff, you will hear the announcement that Falcon 9 is in startup, which means that the rocket's own internal flight computers are now autonomously controlling the launch countdown. This is a great shot of the fairing, and inside that fairing again are the 88 spacecraft as part of the Transporter 2 mission. Weather remains green. The range is also standing by to support. And as a reminder, if we don't get the opportunity to launch today, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at the same time.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there was the call up for second stage LOX loading complete. That is the last of propellant loading. Falcon 9 is now fully fueled and ready for liftoff in about 1 minute and 40 seconds. You can start to see some white clouds starting to form around Falcon 9. That is normal and expected for us at this stage in the countdown. When the dense cold liquid oxygen meets the warmer ambient air of Florida, it begins to condense and form the white clouds that you see on screen.
Falcon is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup. You can start to hear some of the cheers here in Hawthorne. The first and second stages are beginning to pressurize for launch.
Falcon 9, Transporter 2, LD is go for launch.
That was the launch director giving the final go for launch. We are T-minus 30 seconds from liftoff. Let's tune into terminal count and watch as the Transporter 2 mission begins.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
First stage chamber pressure is nominal.
We are T-plus 42 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 has cleared its tower, and we're currently throttling down in preparation for max Q. That should be coming up in about 20 seconds. Max Q is where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures.
Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And you heard the call out. We've passed the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. Falcon 9 is now headed south along the Florida coast. All is looking good with the first stage trajectory. We have 5 events coming up in quick succession in about a minute. The first is main engine cutoff, also known as MECO, followed by stage separation, where the 2 stages will separate from one another. The first stage will then perform a flip to head back towards Florida, and the MVAC engine on the second stage will perform second engine start 1 and ignite that MVAC engine. Then the first stage will also begin its first of 3 burns, the boost back burn. And this is a view from the top of Falcon 9 looking down towards the 9 Merlin engines at the bottom of the first stage.
Stage separation confirmed.
And there you saw on screen, we had successful stage separation. The first stage started performing its flip maneuver. And the boost back burn should be ending in about 25 seconds.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
And there was confirmation of a successful boost back burn. Again, that is the first of 3 burns for the first stage. Coming up next is fairing deploy in a few seconds here from the top of the second stage.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And off come the 2 fairing halves, and they have separated and fallen away from the vehicle, exposing the 88 spacecraft to the vacuum of space. As a reminder, the recovery vessel HOS Briarwood will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today from the water. So we are about T plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds into flight. We have a couple of views on screen. On the right-hand side is a view of our second stage Merlin vacuum engine, also known as the MVAC engine. It's currently in the first of 2 MVAC burns. This burn should last for until the T plus 8 minute and 24 second mark. About another 4 minutes left on this burn. And the next milestone will be for the first stage to perform its entry burn. That's what you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen. Falcon 9 needs to execute an entry burn to slow itself down before hitting the dense parts of the atmosphere. And without this burn, relying on the atmosphere alone to slow Falcon 9 down would put unnecessary strain on the rocket.
Vehicle is on a nominal trajectory.
The call out for a nominal trajectory. Everything's looking great so far on the Transporter 2 mission. You also notice some honeycomb-like structures have deployed on the first stage on the left-hand side. Those are our 4 hypersonic grid fins positioned at the base of the inner stage. They help to orient the rocket during reentry by moving the center of pressure. There's also some plumes of gas coming out. This is cold nitrogen gas, which helps with attitude control. Both are essential to make sure that we have a nice targeted landing back on landing zone 1 later on in today's mission. The second burn, the entry burn, is coming up in about 30 seconds. Watch for that on the left-hand side. You can also see there's a speedometer of sorts on the bottom left-hand side. That tracks the speed of the first stage, and when we begin the entry burn, we'll start to reduce the speed, and shortly after the entry burn ends, we'll hit the denser parts of the atmosphere and also begin to further reduce our velocity as the first stage continues to make its way back towards Earth.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn start up.
There's the call out, and you can see on screen 3 Merlin engines have relit and are currently slowing down the first stage. This burn is expected to last for another 15 seconds or so.
Vehicle on a nominal trajectory.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And successful completion of our second of 3 burns. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be attempting to recover the booster for an 8th time back on land at landing zone 1. The first stage has 1 more burn left, the landing burn. It begins just before we touch down and provides the booster with a soft descent before we land. At the same time Falcon lands, we are expecting cycle 1 of our second stage. That's second engine cutoff. And shortly after that, we'll be entering a coast phase. And you can see the Florida coast and landing zone 1 are approaching on the left-hand side of the screen as this booster makes its attempt to land for an 8th time. This is a great shot of the first stage coming down with its landing burn.
Stage 2 internal guidance.
Stage 1, London light deploy.
That was as smooth as I'd seen it. We had phenomenal shots all the way through the landing burn. You heard the sonic booms. This booster has landed for the 8th time. That is the 89th recovery of an orbital class rocket.
Stage 1 nominal landing confirmed.
And what a way to start
Nominal
off the
orbit
Transporter
insertion.
2 mission. At the same time, we did have successful second stage, second engine cutoff, and confirmation of a nominal orbital insertion. We are now going to coast for the next 45 minutes or so while we wait for second engine start 2. Just a few minutes after that, we'll begin to deploy the 88 spacecraft on board this mission. We will see you back here around the T plus 53 minute and 30 second mark.
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
Welcome back to the
Acquisition
Transporter
of
2
signal
mission,
to
our
Garcia.
second dedicated rideshare mission. Falcon 9 lifted off at 3:31 p.m. Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and had successful stage separation. We landed our first stage on landing zone 1 and successfully completed our first second stage burn. We are waiting to relight our MVAC engine on the second stage for a second and final burn. It's going to be a quick burn lasting about 2 seconds, and that should be coming up in about 15 seconds.
MVAC engine chill underway.
Nominal orbit insertion.
So we did have successful second engine start for the second time and successful second engine cutoff, and you just heard the call out for a nominal orbital insertion. So the second stage is going to coast for a few minutes before we start to deploy our satellites. And as I mentioned, this is our second dedicated rideshare mission. Our goal with these rideshare flights is to provide small satellite operators with competitive pricing, increased flight opportunities, and flexibility. These dedicated rideshare flights to sun-synchronous orbits will occur about 3 times a year, providing regular access to orbit. In addition, we also offer opportunities for ride to orbit on our Starlink missions, which launch every couple of weeks. We've launched 4 Starlink missions that include rideshare spacecrafts as well, and we're hoping to launch much more in the future. So coming up in about 2 minutes, we are expecting the start of the deployment sequence. There will be 31 deployments for 88 spacecraft, which will occur over a 30-minute period of time. This includes CubeSats, microsats, and orbital transfer vehicles, sometimes called space tugs, which will deploy their spacecraft after separating from Falcon 9, and also 3 Starlink satellites. Many of these deployments will be grouped within seconds of each other, while others may be a minute or more apart. This is a look at the order of deployments between now and the final deployment around the T+1 hour and 27-minute mark. You should hear the call out from our mission operators as each deployment happens. And to keep in mind, most of these deployments include multiple satellites. So while there are 31 deployments, at the end, we will have put 88 satellites into orbit, again, including our 3 Starlink satellites. We are about a minute away. This is a view of our second stage. And back to the animation. Several of the customers on board this mission have multi-launch agreements with SpaceX. So some of the names might sound familiar to those of you who have tuned in for previous rideshare missions. It's also worth noting that we will lose access to ground station coverage for a short period during the 30-minute window, 30-minute deployment sequence. When we reach that point, we'll let you know. And here's the view of the second stage MVAC engine. Similar to the first transporter mission, we'll be flying a fuel dome payload tray, which is essentially a small platform mounted on the back end of the second stage fuel dome that will release a handful of payloads. And as you may have already noticed, one of our 2 MVAC views is obstructed because of that fuel dome payload tray.
Acquisition of signal, Bangalore.
So we are expecting the first batch of deployments to begin in a few seconds here.
Base 1, separation confirmed. Newsat 19, separation confirmed. First ISI satellite, separation confirmed. Tropics Pathfinder, separation confirmed. Domes 2, separation confirmed. Second ISI satellite, separation confirmed. TIVAC 0211, separation confirmed. YAM-3, separation confirmed. Tubin, separation confirmed. Umbrasar, separation confirmed. Ion satellite carrier, separation confirmed.
So we saw a couple of satellites, and we got confirmation for the NASA's PACE-1, Satellogic's NewSat-19, the first ICE-I satellite from an exoport, NASA's Tropics Pathfinder, Planet IQ's GNOMES-2, the second ICE-I satellite from an exoport, TIVAC 0211, Loft Orbital's YAM-3 from an exoport, and TU Berlin's Tubin from an exoport, the Umbrar SAR, and D-Orbit's Ion satellite carrier. We were expecting to hear the call out for TIVAC 0173, so we're going to check in with the teams and see if we can give you guys an update a little bit later. Coming up, we have another batch of 5. These are going to be for the Space Development Agency General Atomics Peritons Lynx 2, Satellogic's NewSat 20 and 21, Capella SAR satellite, and the third ICE-I satellite from an exoport.
Lynx 2, separation confirmed. NewSat 20, separation confirmed. NewSat 21, separation confirmed. Capella SAR satellite, separation confirmed. Third ICE-I satellite, separation confirmed.
So we got confirmation for...
Expected loss of signal, Diego Garcia.
We got confirmation for 5 more deployments. That was the Space Development Agency General Atomics Peritons Lynx 2, Satellogic's NewSat 20 and 21, the Capella SAR satellite, and the third ICE-I satellite from an exoport. For those that are wondering, exoport is an adapter, special adapter built by our ExoLaunch customer. We are about halfway through the 31 total deployments on today's mission. And coming up, we have 2 more deployments. These are going to be for the Space Development Agency General Atomics Lynx 1, as well as the DARPA Space Development Agency Air Force Research Laboratories Mandrake 2 Able.
Lynx 1, separation confirmed. Mandrake 2 able, separation confirmed.
We got confirmation for Space Development Agency General Atomics Paraton's Lynx 1 deployment, as well as the DARPA Space Development Agency Air Force Research Laboratories Mandrake 2 able. And coming up in less than a minute, we are expecting the next deployment. It's going to be the 4th ICE-I satellite from an exoport.
Fourth ICE-I satellite, separation confirmed.
And that was confirmation of the 4th ICE-I satellite from an exoport. The next batch of deployments, there's going to be 6 of them. It is for Swarm's 1st and 2nd Space B cluster from an exoport, Nano Avionics D2 Altacom 1 from an exoport, Spire's Lemur number 1 from an exoport, Satellogic's NewSat 22, and Loft Orbital's YAM2 satellite.
First Space B cluster, separation confirmed. Second Space B cluster, separation confirmed. D2 Atlacom 1, separation confirmed. Lemur number 1, separation confirmed. NewSat 22, separation confirmed. YAM2, separation confirmed.
And we got some really cool views of the satellites separating. That was for Swarm's 1st and 2nd Space B cluster from an exoport, Nano Avionics D2 Altacom 1 from an exoport, Spire's Lemur number 1 from an exoport, Satellogic's NewSat 22, and Loft Orbital's YAM2 satellite. The next two deployments are going to happen during a blackout period, which means that we lose camera views and telemetry. While we wait to regain access to ground station coverage in a few minutes, sit back and follow along with our animation that shows you where we're at in the mission. We'll see you back here at the T+ 1 hour and 15-minute mark.
Expected loss of signal, Bangalore.
Welcome back to the webcast for Transporter-2, SpaceX's second dedicated small-sat rideshare program mission. On board this mission are 88 spacecraft, including 3 Starlink satellites. We are currently waiting to hear callouts for 2 deployments which occurred during a blackout period with no access to ground station coverage. So those 2 are Spire's Lemur number 2 from an exoport and DARPA Space Development Agency Air Force Research Laboratories Mandrake 2 Baker.
Lemur number 2 and Mandrake 2 Baker, separations confirmed.
Acquisition of signals, forward.
And there was the confirmation for Spire's Lemur number 2 from an exoport, the DARPA Space Development Agency Air Force Research Laboratories Mandrake 2 Baker satellites. Coming up, the next 2 deployments will happen a few minutes from now. Those will be for Spaceflight Incorporated's Sherpa FX2 and the LTE-1 satellites. And we're going to leave you with a short animation and sit back and follow along, and we'll see you back here once we hear those callouts.
Acquisition of signal to Lee.
Welcome back once again to the webcast for Transporter-2, SpaceX's second dedicated smallsat rideshare program mission. We have two deployments coming up. These are going to be the last two for our rideshare customers. They are for Spaceflight Incorporated's Sherpa FX2 and Sherpa LTE-1. And that should be coming up in about 20 seconds.
Sherpa FX2 separation confirmed. Sherpa LTE-1 separation confirmed.
And you see on screen and heard the confirmation. We got confirmation of Spaceflight Incorporated's Sherpa FX2 and Sherpa LTE-1 deployment. Now, these are the last of our rideshare deployments for today, but we're not done. We have 3 Starlink satellites to deploy as well. That's going to be coming up in a few minutes here, so sit back. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll see you back here at the T plus 1 hour and 27-minute mark. and welcome back to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter-2 mission. If you're just joining us, we are close to the end of today's mission, which launched this morning from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at 3:31 p.m. Eastern Time. We then had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine, then successful deployment of a majority of our spacecraft for our commercial
173,
and
separation confirmed.
Government customers. We were also able to successfully recover our first stage for an 8th time on our landing zone. We just had the confirmation of the TIVAC 0173 satellite. So all payloads so far are have been confirmed for deployment, and we have 3 Starlink satellites to go, and we are expecting confirmation of that deployment here shortly.
Expected loss of signal, Svalbard.
Starlink deploy confirmed.
And there goes our 3 Starlink satellites. Again, that is 88 spacecraft confirmed for deployment on today's Transporter-2 mission. With that said, we will be bringing our webcast to an end. We would like to thank all of our rideshare customers for their support on today's mission. We would also like to thank the United States Air Force for range support, as well as the Federal Aviation Administration for licensing. Continue to follow us on SpaceX.com for future missions and milestones, as well as our Twitter and Instagram profiles. And if you are excited by what you've seen today and want to join our team, visit SpaceX.com/careers to learn more about working at SpaceX. And as always, thank you to all of our viewers for your continued support, and have a great rest of your day.
LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
COSMO-SkyMed is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8.
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. It's Sunday, January 24th, and we're here at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 10 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Andy Tran, and I'm a production supervisor here at SpaceX. Welcome to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter-1 mission. It's our first dedicated small-sat rideshare program launch and third launch of 2021. If you joined us yesterday, you know we scrubbed for weather, specifically for the surface electricity field rule. Today's weather has also been a bit challenging, but we're currently looking good for our T0 liftoff time. On board this mission are 133 commercial and government spacecraft, in addition to 10 Starlink satellites, the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. This count includes CubeSats, microsats, and 2 orbital transfer vehicles, sometimes called space tugs, which will deploy their spacecraft after separating from Falcon 9. SpaceX created the SmallSat rideshare program to provide small satellite operators with competitive pricing, increased flight opportunities, flexibility, and most importantly, a ride to space on SpaceX's Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, as well as Starship in the not-too-distant future. For more details on our rideshare program or to reserve your spot, head over to our website at spacex.com/rideshare. Now let's take a look at Falcon 9 out on the pad at the Cape. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9, our 70-meter, 2-stage liquid-fueled launch vehicle. Today's mission is the 5th flight for this particular booster. Its first 4 flights were all in 2020, which included our Crew Dragon Demo 2 mission for NASA in May, the Anasis 2 mission in July, a Starlink mission in October, and most recently, CRS-21 in December. You can tell by the re-entry soot at the bottom of the vehicle that this booster has flown before. That bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is the first stage. Its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere into space and then separate from the rest of the rocket. From there, it will make its way back to Earth and target a landing on a recovery vessel. Of course, I Still Love You. There she is on screen. On top of the first stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage. This composite material houses the larger nozzle of the second stage engine. And then on top of the inner stage is the Falcon 9 second stage, which will take the payload to its eventual destination in orbit. After the first stage separates about 2.5 minutes into flight, the second stage will then carry the 143 spacecraft to orbit. In order to get to the intended orbit today, we'll need to light our second stage twice before deploying all of our payloads. And at the top of the rocket, you'll notice a large nose cone. This is called the fairing. It's a composite structure and protects the rocket from the forces of ascent and also houses our payloads. Once the vehicle is outside of the Earth's atmosphere, the fairing separates to expose the satellites to space. For today's mission, both fairings halves are brand new, and our recovery vessel, Miss Chief, will be attempting to recover the fairing halves from the water following landing. And finally, the large truss structure next to Falcon 9 is called the Transporter Erector. We also refer to it as the TE. Its job is to roll Falcon 9 out to the launch pad, raise it to a vertical launch position, and also route power, fluids, and communication to the rocket and satellite. It will retract away from the rocket slightly around the T-minus 4.5 minute mark, providing clearance for Falcon 9 to lift off. The chief engineer held a technical poll at the T-minus 1 hour mark, and the launch director held a propellant load and launch go-no-go poll at the T-minus 38 minute mark. Weather is still tracking to be green for a T0 liftoff. Falcon 9 has been loading propellants since the T-minus 35 minute mark. The vehicle uses a refined form of kerosene called RP1 for its fuel and super chilled liquid oxygen, or LOX, as its oxidizer. Currently, RP1 is fully loaded on the second stage and nearly fully loaded on the first stage. Liquid oxygen is currently loading and currently underway on both stages. As for helium, it began loading before the webcast went live and will continue to top off until about a minute and a half before launch. We use helium as a pressurant as the propellants are pulled out by the engine pumps. In about a minute, around T-minus 7 minutes, engine chilling will begin. This is where we allow a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to flow into the Merlin engine turbopumps prior to the full flow of LOX to avoid any thermal shocks to the system. Checkouts of the second stage thrust vector control actuators will also be underway. This is known as the engine wiggle test. We move the thrust chamber slightly to make sure that the guidance hardware is a go for flight. The first stage actually does the same test, but it happens just seconds before ignition. So far, the vehicle is healthy. We are currently working no issues. The range is standing by and currently green for launch. And again, weather is a tracking item, but right now we are green for T0 liftoff time. We are currently 7 minutes from liftoff. Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. In about 2 minutes, the transport erector will start to retract away and enter its pre-launch position about 2 degrees from the rocket. At liftoff, hydraulics will move it to a position about 45 degrees away from the rocket. Again, around the T-minus 4.5 minute mark, you'll hear some hiss and pop, and that's pressure venting from the rocket and the plumbing of the transporter erector. The vehicle remains in good health. We're continuing to load propellant on both the first and second stages. You can see that we've had some gaseous oxygen venting from Falcon 9. About a minute before liftoff, you'll hear the announcement that Falcon 9 is in startup, which means that the rocket's own internal flight computers are now autonomously controlling the launch countdown. The payload inside the fairing halves continue to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather, again, is a tracking item for us, but currently we're green. And as a reminder, if we don't launch today, we'll make another attempt sometime in the future, and we'll let you know as soon as we know that date. And as I mentioned earlier, today's launch is the first of SpaceX's dedicated smallsat rideshare program, which provides small satellite operators with competitive pricing and increased flight opportunities on board the world's most advanced and proven launch vehicles. As part of the program, we also offer traditional rideshare opportunities on existing low Earth orbit missions and on SpaceX's Starlink missions, which launch about once a month. Traditionally, it's pretty hard to find affordable space on a rocket for a small satellite. Our rideshare program groups small sats together, making it easier to purchase a less expensive ticket to orbit on a predictable schedule. And unlike traditional rideshare opportunities, our rideshare missions are not dependent on a primary payload. Our missions are pre-scheduled and will not be held up by delays with co-passengers. So that means that if you're ready to fly during the scheduled launch period, you will fly. Since we announced the program, we have launched 4 rideshare missions, including 2 Starlink missions with Planet on board, 1 Starlink mission with spaceflight riding along, as well as the SAOCOM 1B mission. And in fact, one of these customers flew less than 6 months after their contract with SpaceX, which is a pretty remarkable turnaround time. We're really excited for today's mission, not only because it's the first dedicated rideshare, but because it will also be the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to the more than 130 small satellites on board for our commercial and government customers, we have 10 Starlink satellites of our own riding along. And as many of you may know, Starlink is a constellation of satellites that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet all over the globe, particularly in remote or rural areas where connectivity is limited or completely unavailable. The 10 Starlink satellites launching aboard this mission will also be the first Starlink satellites deployed to a polar orbit, and many of the future Starlink sats flying to the polar orbit will actually launch from our Vandenberg site here in California. The Vandenberg team is hiring for a number of open positions to support our growing operations there. If you're interested in working on the launch team that will help all kinds of payloads launch from our West Coast facility, head over to spacex.com/careers and apply. We are about 3 minutes from liftoff. Falcon 9 is moving into the final stages of the countdown. The payload and vehicle remain healthy, and we're still currently tracking weather to be green for a T0 liftoff at 10 a.m. Eastern. In about 30 seconds, around the T-minus 2 minute mark, we should finish liquid oxygen loading, and that will wrap up the final propellant loading for Falcon 9. For those just joining us, this is the Transporter-1 mission for SpaceX, the third launch of 2021, and the first dedicated small-sat rideshare mission for SpaceX. And we just heard the call that LOX loading is completed. Again, that is the last of propellant loading for Falcon 9. And on screen, you can start to see some white clouds forming around Falcon 9. That is normal and expected for us at this stage in the countdown. That is liquid oxygen condensing as it meets the warmer ambient temperatures of the Florida air.
Falcon 9's in startup.
And the vehicle is in startup. Both stages are beginning to pressurize for launch. In a few seconds here, we should be hearing the launch director give the final go for liftoff.
LD on countdown 1, go for launch.
And there you heard it. That is the final go for launch at T-minus 35 seconds. All systems are go for the Transporter-1 mission. Let's listen and watch in as we lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Impulse pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
We are T plus 43 seconds into flight. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower and is currently throttling down to prepare for max Q at around the T plus 1 minute and 12 second mark. Max Q is where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures.
Falcon 9 is supersonic. Max Q.
And we've just passed max Q. That is a really cool tracking shot of Falcon 9. All is looking good with the stage 1 trajectory. In about a minute, we have 3 events coming up in quick succession. First up is main engine cutoff. That's where the 9 engines on the first stage will shut off, followed by stage separation, where the first and second stages will separate from one another. Shortly after that, we'll have second engine start 1. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite its engine and continue its journey into orbit.
MVAC engine chill has begun.
We're about 20 seconds away from main engine cutoff, the start of those 3 events happening in rapid succession.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Coming up in a few seconds, we should have the fairing deploy.
MVAC ignition.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you can see the 2 fairing halves have separated and fallen away from the vehicle, exposing the 143 spacecraft to the vacuum of space. And as a reminder, our recovery vessel, Miss Chief, will be attempting to recover the fairing halves today from the water. We're at T plus 3 minutes and 30 seconds into flight. We have a couple of views on screen right now. On the right-hand side is a view of the second stage, specifically the MVAC engine. It's currently in the first of its 2 MVAC burns. This burn should last for about another 5 minutes or so. And on the left-hand side of your screen is a view from the top of our first stage looking down. The next milestone for the first stage will be its re-entry burn. Falcon 9 needs to execute an entry burn to slow itself down before hitting the dense parts of the atmosphere. Without this burn, relying on the atmosphere alone to slow Falcon 9 down will put unnecessary strain on the rocket. And that entry burn is coming up at around the T plus 7 minute and 47 minute mark, just a few minutes from now. For those just joining us, this is the Transporter-1 mission for SpaceX, the first dedicated small-sat rideshare program mission, and it's also the 3rd mission of 2021. We're just waiting on the next major event for this mission, which is the first stage entry burn. That's going to be happening around the T plus 7 minute and 47 mark. You can see some periodic bursts of gas from the first stage. That is nitrogen from our attitude control systems. They help to orient the first stage as it continues to make its descent back towards Earth. And as we get closer to the Earth, you'll start to notice those honeycomb-like structures on the left-hand side of your screen start to move and pivot. Those are our hypersonic grid fins, and those help to steer the first stage back as it returns back to Earth. As for the second stage, impact performance looks nominal. Just a few seconds after we finish the stage 1 entry burn, we'll be shutting off the second stage Merlin vacuum engine and enter a small coast phase. Again, we'll need to relight this engine later on in the mission to get to our eventual destination in orbit.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
We are about 45 seconds away from that stage 1 entry burn. For the entry burn, it is a 3-engine burn, so 3 of the 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will relight and start to slow the stage down before it hits the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there's the entry burn. 3 of the 9 Merlin engines have relit. This burn is expected to last for about 30 seconds.
Second stage and terminal guidance.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And you can see on screen the entry burn has concluded, and in just a few seconds we should be hearing the call out for second engine cutoff, where we'll shut down the second stage MVAC engine.
FTS is saved.
There's the second stage.
Also signal stage 1, Cape expected.
The second stage has shut down its engine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be attempting to recover the booster for a 5th time.
Nominal parking orbit insertion.
On our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. The first stage has 1 more burn left, the landing burn, and it begins just before we touch down and provides the booster with a soft descent before we land. That should be starting up anytime now. And we did get confirmation of the second stage that it did reach a good parking orbit.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
LOS stage 2, Cape Canaveral expected.
And Falcon 9 returns safely once again. That is the 5th time for this particular booster and the 73rd recovery of an orbital class rocket. A great way to start off the mission and a great way to start off the Sunday. We're now going to coast for the next 45 minutes or so while we wait for SES-2, or second engine start number 2. We're going to leave you with an animation that shows you where we're at in the coast phase, and we'll see you back here at the T+ 54 minute mark. Welcome back to the Transporter 1 mission. If you're just joining us, Falcon 9 lifted off at 10 a.m. Eastern from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, had successful stage separation. We landed our first stage on our drone ship for the 5th time and successfully completed our first second stage burn. On screen right now is a view of the second stage MVAC engine. We are waiting to relight that engine for the second and final burn. This burn will be a quick one, lasting only 2 seconds. And we're expecting that burn to start in just a few seconds here. And if we don't have footage of it, we should be able to get confirmation over the nets. And there is second engine startup and then cut off. Now we're waiting for confirmation of a good orbit on that second stage.
Nominal payload orbit insertion.
And there's the call out that we want. That is a confirmation of a good orbit. Next up will be the deployment of our 133 spacecraft on board the mission, which will occur over an 18-minute period. And as a reminder, today's mission is the first dedicated smallsat rideshare program mission. We created this program to provide small satellite operators with regularly scheduled rides on board Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and in the not too distant future, Starship as well. These missions offer competitive pricing to our customers as well as increased flight opportunities and flexibility. As part of this program, we're also offering traditional rideshare opportunities on existing low Earth orbit missions and on SpaceX's Starlink missions, which provide launch opportunities about once a month. The first of those deployments should be happening around the T+ 58-minute and 30-second mark. There's a view of the Transporter 1 payload containing all 143 spacecraft. For today's ride shares, there are 11 ports on our payload adapter responsible for sending 133 spacecraft plus our 10 Starlink satellites into orbit. Some of these ports will have multiple deployments. For these, over the countdown nets, we'll hear callouts for when the deployment sequence has begun and another callout for when the deployment sequence has completed. There are also then a handful of ports that will deploy only once, and we'll try to let you know who the customer is for each deployment, along with how many spacecraft are being sent into space. We're just over a minute away from the first set of deployments. Due to the nature of the payload stack, we will not have visuals for every deployment, but we do hope to catch most of them with our 2-camera views. It's also worth noting that we will lose access to ground station coverage for a short period during the 18-minute deployment sequence, and when we reach that point, we'll let you know over the webcast. First up, the deployment sequences for port C4 and C1 will be initiated at the T+ 58-minute and 30-second mark. On port C4, there are 36 Planet SuperDoves, and then there are 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port on port C1. And we're hoping to get
Ports C4 and C1 deployment sequences initiated.
those call-outs. The deployment sequence has started for 36 of Planet's SuperDoves on port C4, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port on C1. We're expecting these deployments to conclude about 11 minutes from now. In just a few seconds, we should be starting up the deployment for our customer Maverick, which contains 3 CubeSats for NASA's Small Spacecraft Technology Program's VR-3X mission. It's going to be deploying from the aft end fuel dome, which essentially is a small platform mounted on the back end of the second stage fuel dome, right above the MVAC engine.
Aft end payload deployed.
And there you heard the callouts. 3 CubeSats aboard Maverick's Mercury dispenser have deployed. These are for NASA's Small Spacecraft Technologies Program VR-3X mission. The next call out will be to start deployment sequence for our customer NanoRacks around the T+ 1 hour and 8 minute mark. And while we wait for this deployment sequence to begin, we're going to leave you with views of the deployments for Planet and Kepler. And we'll see you back here at the T+ 1 hour and 7 minute mark.
Also signal reef expected.
Welcome back to the webcast for Transporter-1, SpaceX's first dedicated smallsat rideshare program mission. On board this mission are 143 spacecraft, the most spacecraft ever deployed on a single mission. If you're just joining us, Falcon 9 had an on-time liftoff at 10 a.m. Eastern from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It followed a nominal trajectory after liftoff. The first stage landed for the 5th time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, and our second stage had 2 successful engine burns. So far, the deployment sequence has begun for 36 of Planet's CubeSats, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port. If you're looking closely at the left half of your screen, you should see them in the background being deployed from the payload. We're expecting those to be completed around the T plus 1 hour and 9 minute mark. We've also deployed 3 CubeSats for our customer Maverick. We're now waiting to hear that the deployment sequence has started from port C3 for the 9 spacecraft for NanoRac's EAR-1 mission. And while we're waiting for that call out, the white dot on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the moon. Some pretty cool shots of the moon there. And there goes another satellite. Again, we're waiting for confirmation from the team for the 9 spacecraft for NanoRac's EAR-1 mission. And there's the confirmation for the 9 spacecraft. We're expecting to get confirmation that these have completed deployment in about 8 minutes from now once we pass through our ground station blackout period, so stay tuned for that.
Also signal Bangalore as expected.
Next up, we're expecting to get the confirmation that the 36 of Planet's Super Doves have deployed, as well as the 17 spacecraft aboard Kepler's port. And we did get that call out. So far, we've successfully deployed 56 of our 133 smallsat rideshares today. 9 spacecrafts have started their deployment sequence and should wrap up in the next few minutes, leaving another 68 still yet to be initiated. We've now entered that blackout period I mentioned earlier, which means we lose camera views and telemetry. During this time, we are expecting quite a bit of activity, but we won't get confirmation of successful deployments until we regain ground station connectivity around the T plus 1 hour and 15 minute mark. Here's a preview of what will be happening until we regain that connectivity. 9 spacecraft for NanoRacks will complete their deployment sequence. The first of 2 ports for our customer ExoLaunch will start and then finish deploying from port B3. Their second port, B2, will also begin its deploy sequence, but won't be completed until approximately T plus 1 hour and 16 minutes. ExoLaunch has a total of 30 spacecraft on today's mission. From there, 2 spacecraft will deploy for our customer Capella from 2 separate ports. And lastly, Spaceflight Incorporated customer IQPS's satellite will also separate. And while we wait to regain access to ground station coverage in a few minutes, sit back and follow along with our animation that shows you where we're at in the mission. We'll see you back here at the T plus 1 hour and 15 minute mark. And welcome back once again to the Transporter-1 mission. We're in the middle of deploying 133 small sats for commercial and government customers. We're expecting to reconnect with the ground station in just a few seconds, and we should be hearing callouts for the deployments that we didn't see, and these callouts should be happening back-to-back once we reconnect. During this blackout period, we also were able to recover both fairing halves, and they are safely on board our ships. And the callouts for the satellites should be happening around the T+1 hour and 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 50-second mark.
Acquisition of signal, Cordova.
Deployments confirmed on ports C3, B3, C5, B1, and C6. Port B2 deployment sequence initiated and confirmed.
So we did get some confirmations. We should have some more callouts happening in just a few seconds here, and I'll summarize once all of the callouts are done.
Port A4 deployment confirmed. Port A2 deployment confirmed. Port B2 deployment sequence complete.
It sounds like we've gotten all the callouts. I'm going to go ahead and recap all of the different ports. So from port C3, the NanoRacks EAR-1 mission's 9 payloads have deployed. From port B3 and B2, the ExoPort-1 spacecraft deployed with 2 ICE-Eye radar imaging satellites aboard, and ExoPort-2 with 28 spacecraft from the DLR ICE-Eye Nanoavionics Swarm and TU Dresden began its deployment. From port C5 and C6, deployed 1 small sat each for our customer Capella. From port B1, the Spaceflight Incorporated customer's IQPS satellite has also deployed. And from port A4, SpaceX Spaceflight Incorporated's Sherpa FX-1 spacecraft has deployed with its 13 spacecraft on board. From port B2, the final small sats for EXO launch have now deployed, making for a total of 30 on today's mission. And from port A2, D-Orbit's Pulse mission with its 20 spacecraft on board has also deployed. And that will conclude the rideshare portion of the mission. With these deployments behind us, we are now going to enter another short coast phase before deploying our 10 Starlink satellites. So sit tight, enjoy the music, and we'll be back at the T+1 hour and 30-minute mark. We'll see you then.
Acquisition of signal, Pogo. loss of signals, 12 art, as expected. Acquisition of signal, New Hampshire.
Welcome back to the webcast for SpaceX's Transporter-1 mission. If you're just joining us, we are close to the end of today's mission, which launched this morning from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at 10 a.m. Eastern. We then had 2 successful ignitions and shutdown of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine, then successful deployment of our 133 spacecraft for our commercial and government customers. We were also able to successfully recover our first stage for a 5th time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, and recover both fairing halves from the water. Coming up, we'll have the deployment of our 10 Starlink satellites. It's going to be the first set of Starlink satellites deployed to a polar orbit, and that should be happening in about 30 seconds. And there's a view of the second stage. That right there is a view of the Starlink satellites to the right-hand side. It looks like we lost a signal on the second stage. Hopefully we can get that back. If we don't have views of the second stage, we should get confirmation via the callouts of deployments of those Starlink satellites.
Expected. Partial data back from New Hampshire.
And there goes the 10 Starlink satellites, the first set to go to a polar orbit. With those 10, that is 143 spacecraft deployed on a single mission, the most ever. Pretty awesome. With that said, that will be bringing our webcast to an end. We would like to thank all of our rideshare customers for their support on today's mission. We'd also like to thank the United States Air Force for range support, as well as the Federal Aviation Administration for licensing. Continue to follow us on SpaceX.com for future missions and milestones, as well as our Twitter and Instagram profiles. And if you are excited about what you've seen today and want to join our team, visit SpaceX.com/careers to learn more about working at SpaceX. Thank you to all of our viewers for your continued support, and have a wonderful rest of the day.